1 Timothy chapter 1. The law is made for the lawless and insubordinate. 1 Timothy chapter 1 is part of a letter written by the Apostle Paul to his disciple Timothy. Paul instructs Timothy to appoint elders who are to oversee the church in Ephesus. In this chapter, Paul addresses the importance of sound doctrine and warns against false teachers who promote speculations and false teachings. Exegesis by sections and verses. Verses 1 to 2. Greeting and Paul's authority. Paul introduces himself as the author of the letter and highlights Timothy as its recipient. He emphasizes his authority as an apostle and underscores Timothy's role as a faithful servant of Christ. Verses 3 to 4. The purpose of the letter. Paul explains that he left Timothy in Ephesus to address certain individuals who were teaching false doctrines and to command them to teach sound doctrine instead. He said that they have strayed, had turned aside to idle talk, and desired to be teachers of the law, but that they did not understand what they were saying, or the things which they affirmed. These false teachers were deviating from sound doctrine, focusing on myths and endless genealogies, rather than on the truth. Verses 5 to 7. The goal of our instruction. Paul emphasizes that the aim of his instruction is love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. He warns against those who have turned aside to vain discussions and desire to be teachers of the law but lack understanding of what they are saying. Verses 8 to 11. The law and its purpose. Paul affirms that the law is good if used lawfully, recognizing that it is not made for righteous people, but for the lawless and disobedient. He lists several sins, including homosexuality, which are contrary to sound doctrine and are condemned by the law. Verses 12 to 17. Paul's testimony. Paul expresses gratitude to Christ for enabling him to serve despite his former blasphemy, persecution, and ignorance. He highlights the abundant grace and faith he received, showcasing his own transformation as an example of God's mercy and patience. Verses 18 to 20. Instructions to Timothy. Paul charges Timothy to fulfill the prophecies previously made about him and to fight the good fight, holding on to faith and a good conscience. He mentions two individuals, Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom he handed over to Satan for their blasphemy and to teach them not to blaspheme. Overall summary. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, Paul establishes his authority as the author and addresses the false teachings that had emerged in Ephesus. He emphasizes the importance of sound doctrine and warns against those who promote speculative ideas and engage in vain discussions. Paul shares his own testimony of how he was transformed by God's grace and urges Timothy to fulfill his calling as a faithful servant. The chapter concludes with instructions for Timothy and the disciplinary action taken against individuals who blasphemed.